In 1936, it was a period of what we call the Arab Great Revolt. The revolt of the Arabs here living in what we called Palestine, the British Mandate. You do realize that the British Mandate was formed as a result of the Great War, or the First World War, which was called later. And we went through that period under the British. The revolt was from 36 to 39, and it was crushed by the British with, I would say, hard force. If you don't know, but there was a death punishment at that time, and they used to hang people for that. At the end of the Arab Revolt, two things happened. One was that the British Mandate, the Secretary of the Territories of the colonies at that time, published what we used to call the White Book, but it was a white paper. It was one of three. The first white paper was issued when Churchill was the Secretary of the Colonies in 1922. Just to remind you, the British mandate over Palestine, the Balfour Declaration, included at that time what we now call the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. It was Churchill who created the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan and reduced the size of the promised land in the Balfour Declaration to what we call the western side of Palestine, Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea. The second white paper was published in 1930. It had nothing to do yet still with the conflict of the Zionist aspiration. And in 1939, the third white paper included two important issues. One is limiting Jewish immigration to Palestine to the level of 75,000 over 5 years, and limiting, almost bringing it to zero, the ability to purchase land. The second thing that happened was the outbreak of Second World War. Just to point out, I would say that at the break of the Second World War, 1939, there are probably 500,000 Jews living in that part in Palestine. With the development of the war, the number of Israelis, Jews, who joined the British forces came to almost 40,000. By the way, during the Second World War, the number of Jews fighting in the American Army, French Army, British Army, Canadian Army, South African, and Russian amounted to 1,250,000 about. So you can imagine, when we speak about contribution of us Jews during the fight against the Nazis during the Second World War, that out of what remained from 16 million Jews, where 6 million were killed, 1.25 million people is a lot. On the other hand, we had to cope with immigration. So really the illegal immigration or free immigration, that was used to call immigration B, Aliyah Bet, started quite early. It started already before 1939 and ended in 1948. The total number of Jews who came on this illegal immigration process amounted to about 130,000 people. About 110,000 arrived with boats. Many were stopped by the British Navy and took either to this detention camp or Cyprus. The number was probably 10 or 12 or 15,000. 5,500 immigrated or came to Palestine through the Lebanese and Syrian border. They used to travel with smugglers, pay ransom. I was then stationed in the Upper Galilee, in the kibbutz called Kfar Giladi, and we used to accept those people who came from Syria or Lebanon, take them to the British checkpoint, which was in Rosh Pina, and get them into Palestine. 5,500 of them. Some were caught. Here in this camp, in October 1945, were about a little more than 300 people, Jews. About 50 came from Syria. And the British intended to deport them to Syria. At that time, the Haganah decided that this won't take place and planned an operation to relieve all the people who were detained here and get them out of Atlit detention camp or concentration camp. The first Palmach battalion, which was stationed in the Valley of Israel, took upon itself to proceed with the operation. And we had to hurry up before sending the Syrian Jews, about 50 of them, to Syria. I was then a company commander in the 1st Battalion of Palmach in the Valley of Israel. It was company number 6, and I participated in the planning and the operation itself. It wasn't simple. You must remember that it was ruled by the British mandate. The country was full of British army people. It was the end of Second World War, 1945, and the British police. And our arms and weapons were concealed in underground in kibbutzim and other places. And we had to assemble the people to give them the weapons and operate here in that place in order to relieve the 308 exactly refugees who were here. Now we started to assemble 2 companies in Kibbutz Yagur, which was on the other side of the ridge of Carmel. If you drive through Haifa and you go to east, it was the greatest kibbutz in that area. We equipped ourselves with the weapons, walked through the night to a kibbutz which is on top of Mount Carmel, which is called Beit Oren, stayed in the woods around the kibbutz, and towards the second night went down. And the operation was quite complicated in a way, because we had to make sure that the area of operation will be closed to British forces. British forces could come either through the Carmel itself, or through Haifa, or from the south. The operation the intention was that the operation would be a very quiet one. No killing, no force. So what we did was, 2 days earlier, as disguised as teachers, few Palmach people came in. There were some Jewish police within this Atlit concentration camp. And the plan was that they will disarm the guards around the camp and not enable the British police to come in, which was done. The refugees themselves were prepared for the evacuation, and every one of them had his own pekel, which he kept to himself. We thought that they should leave their pekels here, the suitcases, whatever it is, because we had to take them barefoot up to Mount Carmel. They were not young people, they were children, they were adults, they were old people. After the guards were caught without really doing any damage and kept aside, we opened the barbed wire around it, and we took the 308 people in the direction of Bet Oren, which is quite a hike. The first part of it is this plain kind of area, but then you have to climb up the mountain. And they didn't want to leave the luggage, the pekels, whatever. And I can understand them. They came here and they cherished those things. They didn't want to leave it behind. This was part of their life. And it made the voyage quite almost impossible. I can tell you that we carried the children on our shoulders. We held the old ladies to go out. And it took longer than we thought. After I finished my job as blocking the road to Haifa, I was the rear guard of this whole thing. Spread over a mile, people coming up to Beit Oren. And we reached Beit Oren almost at daybreak. And the British knew already what happened. And there were Spitfires flying around to look for us. We were in the woods. And then they've tried to encircle the kibbutz itself. What we did was, first of all, we dig some in the area and put our guns there and covered them, and went to the kibbutz with the people of the refugees themselves. And there's something outstanding happened. Thousands of people from Haifa came in. Thousands and thousands. It was all black with people coming in. The British couldn't do nothing. And the refugees, the people who were relieved from this camp, were mixed with all those people, and we could take them out of Bet Oren and find refuges in other kibbutzim and other places. The only casualties was the British police in one of the roads up towards the Druze villages, but nothing happened more than that. In a way, it was the largest operation at that time, if you can imagine. We were an underground operation, and penalty at that time was death by hanging, and bringing all the people, Palmach people here, and equip them with weapons, getting care of the guards, opening the barbed wire, taking the 308 people, and getting them out, saving the Syrian Jews from being deported back to Syria. But this was part of a whole operation, because what we call the Aliyah Bet started, as I said, before 1939, trying to cope with the British blockade in Cyprus. We are very proud. This was an excellent and successful operation. And this is Atlit. I'll tell you a personal story. When I went, I was sent by the army to study at MIT. I took the train from New York to Boston. I had Palmach pin on my lapel. And there was a young man walking back and forth. Finally, he sat beside me and spoke some words in English, in Hebrew. And he told me that he was on a boat which was called Hatikva. He was an officer in the American Navy during Second World War in the Pacific on destroyer. He was a graduate of Harvard College, and he joined the illegal immigration movement. And he jumped off the boat, was caught by the British and put to Cyprus. And there were a group of Bostonians in that group. A fellow by the name of Mark Greenfield who is here, and then a Irishman, as I remember, MacDonald. All those 4 or 5 people, Americans, who joined this Navy trying to overcome the blockade, were in Cyprus and in here. So this kind of closed the story itself. I was driving every morning from Ramat HaSharon to Technion, and I saw how little by little the camps started to disappear. And fortunately enough, some people decided to rebuild it, not all of it, and turn it into something so important for us. Just to explain what went on, how we saved people, what was the issue of getting people from the Holocaust here to our free land. This took place in October 1945, long time ago. Thank you.